What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Paul Nunesdea, and we speak about accreditation of facilitators and collaboration architecture, so stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, Paul, and welcome to the show.
Hello, Miriam. So good to be here.
Yes, I'm very excited to talk to you about facilitation, accreditation, and learnings from going online.
It's really great to be here, and I'm so sorry our listeners are not seeing the wonderful environment we have by seeing you, your beautiful face, your home behind you. It's so nice to be here.
You're flattering me. And before we dive deep into the topic, I always like to start with a question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, Miriam, because I already wrote about it also in my book. You know, when I first discovered the IAF and I attended the meeting that was hosted in Geneva, I think it was 2014, I suddenly realized, my God, but this is what I was already doing in my past professional life. So what the heck are we doing here? Because I already hosted meetings, I already hosted workshops. So when I discovered the IAF, the difference and the reason why I started to call myself as a facilitator is because I discovered there are a set of core competencies that you can be certified. But then I become, to call myself a facilitator, my income dropped dramatically that year.
How did you call yourself before?
Consultant, change consultant. And I was a subsystems analyst, you know, and this is much better marketing than being a facilitator, because no one really understands what's facilitation and why do you need a facilitator. Because everybody already hosts and runs meetings.
That's so true. But do you think that this has changed? I have the impression that, especially now since the pandemic and many people struggling with online meetings and online workshops, I have the impression that the perception of what a facilitator is and the value has increased. Do you have the same impression?
I have, absolutely. That depends on the country where you live and you operate. And now that we are under lockdown, we are becoming a global village, and companies are realizing there's a need for a different kind of approach to the way you organize and host meetings. And in certain countries, like for instance in the Netherlands, you know, it's almost mandatory to hire a facilitator whenever you have a critical meeting, right? Don't necessarily you call them a facilitator, because I understand that in some countries, like in Germany, you use the word moderator.
Which is very different, actually.
Yes, which is conceptually very different. But the point is that you hire someone that is external to the group to help the group to proceed with certain outcome, right? So that's the contract. You have to have an outcome for the group. And this is obviously when I was not calling myself a facilitator, when I was using soft systems methodologies, whenever I was conducting workshops, we always thinking about what is the outcome of this? What is the end product, right? So this concern on getting good products out of meetings, I think it's raising the importance of this profession that we call facilitation, and facilitators.
Yeah. And you mentioned two things that I would like to come back to. One is the IAF, and the other one is the core competencies of a facilitator. So what do you consider the core competencies, and where is then the exact difference to a consultant?
Well, so first of all, the core competencies of a facilitator is something that is probably, it's not an objective perception, right? What I value in the IAF is that my predecessors, the colleagues who founded it, they took a lot of time to think about what could possibly be the core competencies, and they raised a consensus toward these core competencies. And now these core competencies are very useful for us to benchmark what am I doing when I'm practicing facilitation, you know, and this is very, very useful. And now you can also become certified on the way you apply these core competencies. But that said, I'm just saying that perhaps these are not the right core competencies. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I know I follow them because they are out there, ready to serve, ready to be used, but maybe they're not the right core competencies that we could possibly think of for the facilitation of the 21st century.
You know what I mean? The key competence, in your opinion, for the facilitation in the 21st century?
I would say that as the world is now evolving, and this is my personal quest in terms of personal development, I think that the spiritual dimension on human connections is missing in our core competencies as a facilitators. The spiritual dimension that we found in countries like India, and also in New Zealand, is so important. And as you're probably going to ask me more questions, I stop here for expanding on these thoughts.
What a pity, actually, because I would be curious, because when I hear spiritual dimension, it's something that is intangible. It might sound woo-woo to some. So I would be curious what you mean by that, and whether it's also something that would be relevant then in Europe.
I understand your points, Miriam, where you're coming at, because if you're talking with the business manager, like the guy who has a seat on a corporation with stocks in Wall Street or in London Exchange, what are you talking about? Spiritual dimension? I would say, look at the kind of execution the Taliban's accomplish as an organization. What binds them together is the spiritual dimension. So it's really a powerful dimension for business people to be attentive to the spiritual dimension, because it's also the spiritual dimension who built civilizations, in the past.
So what I hear is that it actually boils down to a shared purpose, whether this is a spiritual purpose or a business purpose, maybe doesn't really matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're touching the point. That's the shared purpose. And the value of a religion is, and the spiritual dimension is that it can facilitate the building of a consensus towards something, toward the shared values, right?
Yeah, because spirituality does not necessarily have to do with religion. It can have many takes and shapes and forms.
Absolutely. I would say that religion is a particular form of taking advantage of spirituality for a purpose.
Yes. Interesting spin. Yeah. And you also mentioned that you started calling yourself a facilitator when you joined the IAF. So what was your motivation to join the International Association of Facilitators?
A good question. I was running a company then with more than 50 employees. And for me, the challenge of collaboration was already there. So I began to read more about books on collaboration, and I found out the handbook of the IAF, which is, by the way, pretty outdated right now. It's amazing that in 20 years, there's little progress on the scientific knowledge that sustains facilitation is not progressing at all, at least as far as I know. I've not seen anything else published except perhaps Provoke, a book by Keith Jones and Tessa Sharp. It's a very interesting contribution to the field of facilitation, but not so much from the scientific angle. It's more like from the practitioners built model. They have this Provoke model. It's a fantastic book. I recommend Provoke, the art of transformative facilitation. But besides that, I don't see any progress on the field. And I was attracted to the IAF because of the handbook that I had for a project that I was as a consultant in Portugal. We were applying group decision support tools for decision making. And I realized, oh my God, there's a lot here that I can benefit for my project. So I attended this event in Geneva, and then I said, oh my God, but this is what I was already doing, except that now I have core competencies, and we have a few techniques that are that can be applied. As you know, Miriam, you are also an extremely renowned facilitator yourself, right?
Yeah, and I always find it interesting where different facilitators would put the emphasis on. And I think this might also make it so difficult to research on it, because a lot of the core competencies are subjective and I think different to measure, because it's also about the the interrelation between the group and the facilitator, right? Some really need a process facilitator. Some need a lot of structure. Others rather need a circle conversation.
Definitely. And this is always the challenge. What I think is the division between science and art, right? Because by hiring you as a facilitator, if I'm a customer, if I hire you as a facilitator, I will get a human experience out of the person you are and the way you embody the values of facilitation, the way you deliver that service to me. It's going to be so particularly unique to you that it's like hiring an artist in the end. I'm not hiring a facilitator. I'm hiring Miriam Adnes, because I like her style. And the other day in the IAF, we had a volunteer colleague, Jessica, volunteered to facilitate an action review meeting after FAC Week. And her style was so unique to her. A really business-oriented person, asking questions about our business to ourselves, as meeting owners. I was, oh my God, what? And she pointed out, what's FAC Week? And in fact, FAC Week is the most tribal designation we could possibly imagine, because no one from the outside world would know what's FAC Week. And she pointed out to us that FAC Week is probably not the best name for something that we want to have as a permanent forum. So we decided to buy the domain Facilitation Week. I think it's more clear now.
Yeah, which perfectly points out so many things. One is the relevance and importance to have an outside opinion and an outside guidance. Maybe guidance is better than opinion, because a facilitator makes the group see what they most probably don't. And it also points out the responsibility of the facilitator, a topic that I touched upon with John last week, that depending on the facilitator and their view, the group might go into one direction or another direction. A cluster might gain in importance or not because of the guidance. So from your experience, how do you select a facilitator?
Well, Miriam, that's a very interesting question, because as I was explaining you, let me touch the point you raised about the neutrality. I consider that the neutrality is like the Holy Grail. It's like an aspiration you have. You want to be neutral. You are perceived to be neutral. You need to be neutral to be a good facilitator. But in the end, can you actually be neutral?
Good question.
And the only way I see this neutrality can happen is the day when the AI, artificial intelligence, can build on algorithms that replace the interventions of a facilitator in a group, right?
But wouldn't this take away the creativity? Because as you said, the facilitator also brings in their own personality, and it's an art.
Absolutely. I'm not at all challenged by AI, because in the end, what I'm saying to you is that people would prefer to have a human facilitator rather than AI. And why? Because that human facilitator is not neutral. Is a human being. He's not neutral. He's not like a computer algorithm, right? So that's why I definitely agree with you that it makes a difference on selecting the facilitator. So the advice I would give for anyone to pick a facilitator is to find out if there's a good match in terms of personal relationship. I think that will be the most important criteria. Not that much of a pedigree, not much of course, there's basic skills that you need to have to be a good facilitator. But if there's a good human match between yourself and the group, then you probably good fit for the group. And that's why normally co-facilitation is so useful, because sometimes when you're together with a colleague, the chances for you to be more useful to your client will increase by more than the double. Because sometimes for some participants in the group, your style of intervention could be not the right one, but then your colleague, as she or he intervenes, can then complement the intervention, and then the experience overall for the group will be much better. Yeah. So I have that experience by working with my dear colleague, Peter Sia. We co-facilitate our workshops now in the Digital Collaboration Academy. And it's amazing. We like a lot to work together. It's two voices in the group. It's much better, much better.
Yeah, and I like that you emphasized the complementarity, because then, given that we aspire neutrality, but we cannot achieve it, and actually if we're honest, we don't want to achieve it. Then it's good to have a balance between the co-facilitators and to really choose who would best complement us given the group we're serving.
Absolutely. And that's why I love what you're doing, Miriam, to bringing us together as a collective and bringing facilitators to know each other, because that's the way. I mean, if I find a particular project, a challenge that I have to face, and I have a colleague that I know he has the right skills for that, for instance, then I could call him, hey, do you want to work this together? And that kind of ecosystem between facilitators should be the norm now.
Yeah, totally. And related to the selection of a facilitator, to come back to the IAF, because I'm not accredited as a facilitator. Everything that I learned about facilitation is either from my guest on the podcast or from my previous life as a behavioral economist, just trying to understand and to nudge human behavior. So for you, what is the benefit of being accredited? And would you do a selection that you only work with accredited facilitators?
Oh, I mean, that's a very good point. Obviously, I have to be really honest with you, and there are not. I mean, the IAF is not the exclusive organization that certifies facilitators. There are others. I think there's I don't remember the name of there's another colleague that certifies facilitators, and I think they must have even a more in-depth core of competencies than ours. I mean, ours are easier to do. It's a no-brainer. Anyone like you would be easily a certified professional facilitator with the IAF, because our core competencies are really basic as well as they are useful, right? So it's not that difficult to become a CPF in the IAF.
Can you give some examples of these core competencies?
Well, the most important core competency that I've discovered I would say all the 6 are important. But the first one, I think it's the way you establish your working relationship with your client. Mm. This is something that I think really differentiates the professional facilitator from the amateur facilitator, because there are also people who do excellent job as amateur facilitators. But the professional facilitator needs to pay careful attention in the way he or she builds the relationship with the client. Because if you do not agree up front, what are you going to deliver? How are you going to deliver? And when and how much you're going to charge for that, then you're not really a professional facilitator.
Yeah, and it leaves too many doors open for misunderstandings and trouble, either during the workshop when you're not sure whether you're aligned on the purpose and you might run in the wrong direction, or afterwards when you're not aligned on the deliverables.
Absolutely. And then there's the 6th competencies, because the IAF core competencies, you can find them, search on the web, and you have the core IAF core competencies. I'm sure that you do show that. And then there's also the competency E. I think it's the last one. It's really to keep your professional standards. That's also, I think, whenever you are, for instance, I recently delivered a workshop for the Health at the Forum, and I spent like 2 or 3 hours getting an after action review with my colleague co-hosts, and then wrote an article sharing my knowledge. And that's really important. If you are a professional facilitator, you need to share what you have learned to the community. And you need to make sure that you read all the latest books in the field. You need to attend all the conferences. Like, for instance, the one you organized, never done it before, was really a must conference for anyone that wants to be a professional facilitator. Needs to be at your conferences, definitely.
Wow, I will put this on my door to remember that.
Yeah.
When you say standards in facilitation practice, do you believe that there is one standard that applies to all professional facilitators? Or could you imagine that there are different standards depending on the, let's say, subgroup or tribe of facilitators? Because there are many different forms. Right?
Absolutely, Miriam. I would say that for different types of community work, for instance, I know there's also an association, YAP2, which is an association for facilitators that intervene in communities. There's also Liberating Structures, which is a different a different approach to facilitation, a more modern approach to facilitation, so to say, that appeared after the IAF was created. So standards are something that, depending on the consensus of a particular community, for that community to adopt its consensus. So what happens in the IAF tribe is that the members of the IAF, they join that association because they find that those core competencies is okay. And let's then work on those core competencies. But are these core competencies universal? No, are these core competencies a static thing, a permanent thing like the writing stone? No, absolutely.
This would be dangerous.
Yeah, that's also very, very dangerous. So I have a notion for core competencies like a crutch. It's like a crutch that help you to become better at what you do, right? So, but you can, at a given point, you can have a better crutch. So take it, you have two crutches, even better,
Yeah, and exactly. And especially with technology and development and innovation, we might need another crutch. So do you think that the core competencies or even standards have changed when we moved to online meetings and online workshops being rather the norm than the exception?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And I'm so happy that in the IAF, we have found out the consensus on the facilitation skills, the core competencies are exactly the same wherever the medium you're using, right? Yeah. If it's face-to-face workshop, if it's an online workshop, does not matter, right? So in fact, in my academy, the Digital Collaboration Academy, we have now a certification. We certify for a tool. We don't call us digital facilitators. We call it certified facilitator, right? Because it does not matter whether you apply this technology in a face-to-face meeting or in an online meeting. And that's the same for facilitation. It's the same.
Yeah, I agree. I was personally surprised when I had my first online workshops that I facilitated. In the beginning, I was scared to death. Never created a breakout room before, didn't know anything. And then I realized that if I just applied the skills that I applied in an on-site room in the physical space, it just worked the same as long as you mastered the tool that you're using.
Definitely. The tool is so important, Miriam. And I really love the initiative you have never tried before, because people really have to leave this comfort zone. Yeah. And they have to take on new tools, definitely, because, for hosting a face-to-face workshop, it's so natural to you, because you, as most of us as students from the university, we always know how to use a flip chart. We always know how to write the board. So even the Post-it notes are not that much difficult to master the techniques with Post-it notes, and we have the thoughts process organized in Post-it notes, and then we stick the Post-its in the board, and then you organize the ideas according to clustering the categories. And when you're taking that same process for the online meetings, you definitely need to have a digital tool. You definitely have to, and there's a learning curve. But my say is that if you leave your comfort zone, you will discover a completely new world that makes your life much more easier.
Absolutely.
And productive. Yeah.
It's like growing a muscle. And I think especially when we're leading groups, it's our job to push them out of their comfort zone. But at the same time, we need to be within our comfort zone in order to hold this space. So I think also to gain the empathy for our groups that we facilitate and that we guide, we need to learn and practice this going out of comfort zone ourselves to realize how far we can actually push it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. We have to embrace what's expecting us outside our comfort zone every day. Yeah. Remain curious, take risks, and you will discover that will bring you a lot of benefits.
Yeah, especially if we can combine it with a little bit of joy and a nice, safe community.
Yeah, absolutely. And just don't be afraid to fail. I think that's the most important part. Don't be afraid to fail, because whenever you fail, that's a learning opportunity. You become stronger. Embrace failure as a wonderful opportunity for you to become stronger. There's a saying that, a good horse person, not to say horseman, is the one who fails at least 7 times, So that's probably why I'm so successful with digital tools. I made so many mistakes since the 90s. I started to use these tools. Oh, wow. And I still cherish when, oh my God, a mistake. Let's see what we can learn from here.
And before I ask you about your biggest discovery in this online journey, I first want to ask you, what makes a workshop fail?
Yeah, that's a good question, Miriam, because I would say that there is not a single answer for the failure of the workshop, except humans make workshop failure. Mm-hmm. Humans, and there's a particular characteristic in human beings, which is the human idiosyncrasy, because each one of us has something, or it's my ego perspective on, the other day I was told by a colleague that in a meeting, someone says that, we have 5 core competencies, and the guy corrected, no, sorry, we have 6 core competencies. It's not 5. No, it's 5. And then in the end of the meeting, he says, oh, you're right, it's 6 competencies, but I couldn't say in front of everybody that I was wrong. Ooh. I mean, and this is crazy. I mean, if we are binded by our ego that way, that definitely is the reason why workshops fail.
Yeah, us being in our own way, and our ego that also then leads us to judgment. And although we cannot be neutral, I think if we overcome our ego as best as possible, then we can at least be as neutral as possible as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. And stay curious about the other. Stay curious about the other. Don't take for granted whatever happens, because I have also an experience for someone that is not nice to me, and I say, "What's wrong here? What's happening?" And that curiosity improves obviously human relationships in the end.
Yeah, very true.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag-and-drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
So to come back to the other question, you said that in the 90s, you already started to experiment with digital tools. And over the last year, this has scaled up. I mean, with a speed that was unprecedented. What's been your biggest discovery, let's say in the last year?
Well, the discovery is that the infrastructure was already here for many, many years. We were so lucky that the coronavirus is forcing us to stay home, stay confined, and work online. And then out of a sudden, all of humankind could work the next day. But also the discovery is that we are now discovering that there's 2 kinds of professions in the world, and there's 2 kinds of world. There's the ones like you and me, Miriam, that can stay equally economically productive in working from home. And there's a group of people that are the ones who sustain the physical infrastructure of our planet. I'm talking here about medical staff, nurses, the cleaners in the hospitals, the cleaners in train stations, the people who drive trains, and those guys. And these guys, in certain ways, are extremely low paid in comparison with other professions that are perhaps not so needed. A hedge fund manager is making like 100 times more than a nurse auxiliary in hospital. Is this fair?
Which is so true. And it increases inequality, because those who are actually necessary, they cannot just pivot. So they have a double burden. In case they cannot work, they already earn less and they cannot work. And they're, exposed to the risk to a higher degree.
Definitely. So I hope that the discovery is that the infrastructure exists. So I would say criminal. Perhaps this is too much but I would say criminal for if a company, if an organization, if an institution can have their staff working remotely, that should be mandatory, because that's the way to keep the folks that need to travel to their work safer. I see sometimes the metro in Madrid crowded of people and say, oh my God, all these people need to actually do physical
Despite
work.
the lockdown.
Yeah, no, not the lockdown is not happening still here in Spain, but due to the snowstorm, the subway in Madrid was packed, and I say, oh my God, could these people be working at home instead of taking the train? Because we should reserve public transportation for the ones who actually need to go physically to their work, But unfortunately, for some companies, I still see that some companies say, no, I want my staff in the office. So you have to come here, because at least we see each other, even if wearing masks,
So why is it, and I hear it myself very often, that, oh yeah, we can do all these meetings and workshops online, but to have a real connection and to really get to the core and to bring the team together, we have to be in the same room. Where's the misconception, or maybe the real conception?
This is interesting. That's a very interesting question, Miriam, because it's something that we are fighting our genetical makeup. Right, we are fighting our genetical makeup. You know that there's research say that our brain in the past used much more other senses besides vision. Right, we in the past we used to use smell as good as, for instance, not as good as dogs, because the dogs use it extremely well, but we could now, as mankind evolves genetically, over the years we're evolving. Scientists are discovering that our brain is becoming more and more wired to use visual information above all, right? So I think that's the reason why we still need to get in touch with others physically, because we still have this genetical, we are longing for other cues, like smelling someone. The smell of someone is it makes a powerful brain effect, especially a loved one,
Yeah, for human connection. In German, we have the saying, I cannot smell someone. And this means that you cannot get along.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of vibes, we call it those extra visual vibes that you can get in a physical presence, are for certain kinds of brains are still mandatory, are still crucial, right? Yeah. So, but our species is evolving. I would say that within 2,000 or 3,000 years, suddenly with the lockdown, I started to realize people closing business without actually touching their hands. Like in the past, we shook hands to do the business, and now that's no longer needed. Yeah. And the economy is still going. With the virtual economy is working.
That's true. Yeah, this is maybe indeed the biggest discovery, that we can continue. We could go back to work despite all the restrictions. In your point of view, what is the future of facilitation?
Well, that's. I think that in the future of facilitation is something that lots of colleagues in the IAF are meeting about and writing books about and writing interesting articles. My friend, my dear colleague Paolo from IAF Italy, he wrote an interesting article about the future of facilitation, based also on a survey that it did to a number of facilitators. But I think that it's as facilitation is going to be replaced by AI, and this is also happening for coaching. You can actually design an algorithm that provides you excellent coaching services. And I say, why not also for facilitation? You can be in a meeting, you have AI assistants for the meeting, would ask, okay, guys, what's the purpose of this meeting? And the humans will respond, and then the AI algorithm say, okay, let's clarify that. Okay, let's build the process. The AI algorithm can replace a facilitator, no doubt about it. The techniques of facilitation are easily translated in algorithms. So what's left of facilitation without these algorithms is really the human connections. The human element. So I think the future of facilitation is no longer facilitation. Facilitators will be needed, but yes, we'll need another kind of professionals. I would call them the humanizers. The humanizers.
I like the concept of humanizers, and still I tend to disagree with the AI in terms of facilitation, because there's so much information in the unsaid. there's so much information in silence, in this atmosphere in the room, and it can even be an atmosphere in a Zoom room, I would say. That maybe I'm naive, but I have the impression that it's difficult to grasp. It's body language. It's, okay, we can structure something, we can prioritize, but sometimes you have the feeling that we're not there yet. Or do you think it's something that is actually quantifiable by a machine?
Miriam, I love your perspective. I would write a book on about it, but I'm sorry to say, I mean, I've seen algorithms, AI algorithms, built like this. I approach a camera, mm-hmm. and the computer says to me my age. Mm-hmm. The computer says to me my mood. The computer says a lot about me that are absolutely right. And just why? Because they check my skin color.
I was about to say that.
They check my pulse rate. They check my skin color, they check my pulse rate, and they say, this is a guy that enters the hospital and is very stressed. This is a guy that enters the hospital and is very happy. So AI can tell you this already.
Well, given that you're male, white, middle-aged, because if you're a black woman, then we have seen many examples that then AI up to now screws up in many cases.
Yes, that's being unfair to AI, because AI is really something really, really stupid. AI needs is a huge data lake.
Yes.
So the more cases you have, then AI learns. It's AI is a very stupid machine that learns really fast.
And wouldn't I find this topic fascinating with AI? Especially, I've never thought about AI in relation to facilitation, and I wonder whether this wouldn't bring us to biased outcomes. Because if, as you said, AI is based on big data, we need to nurture it, we need a lot of examples, and then it processes this data to find the next pattern, the next question, the next step in the process. But wouldn't this mean that we eventually standardize and streamline these processes and next steps and points of view that are based on the past? So how much innovation, creativity is actually possible? And wouldn't we then all end up with the same outcomes, with the same results?
So just to make sure what you are telling is that AI could definitely not replace the facilitator. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's true. It's true. It's like, I'm not sure if you are familiar with the Herzberg two-factor theory of motivation, where it says, there are the hygienic factors, that hygienic factors that you need to have in order to be motivated. Mm-hmm. And then there's higher order factors that are the ones who actually motivate you, right? So, for instance, you cannot be motivated if you don't have like a shelter or a minimum food on a table, right? So that's the hygienic factors. Mm-hmm. So same things for meetings, there's hygienic factors in a meeting, and those hygienic factors in a meeting can easily be replaced by AI. The basic things of finding a purpose, clarifying roles, clarifying stance, having a process, this is AI replaced.
Unboxing topics.
But then there's the higher order magnitude of relationship in the group, right? The human connections. And that's where you need no longer a facilitator, but you need a humaniser. The guy that brings the spiritual dimension on the group that can really make a huge impact on what this group can accomplish, because that's where the resilience point goes, How adherent are you to the commitments of your group? So easy to say, yeah, I'm in favor, consensus here, but then you leave the room and you say, oh my God, I hate that guy.
What would be a key characteristic for a good humaniser?
A good humaniser would be someone like you, Miriam.
I hoped you would say that.
Absolutely. Someone like you, because I wish I had the magic formula for the good humaniser, but it's perhaps women are more genetically prone to be more human than men. There are research that says that, because of the XY chromosome. In fact, men miss a chromosome,
Yeah.
And we miss a chromosome, and women have two chromosomes. So that's where they have perhaps more skills and more perception, social awareness, social perception, empathy, be curious about the other, the way you tell good and bad news, it's a lot of skills that you need to develop in order to be a good humanizer.
So social skills, empathy, I hear curiosity.
Yeah, feeling for the other, feeling with the other, and that's where AI can never replace us.
So when you're facilitating a group and you want to bring the spiritual dimension, maybe you have a silver bullet exercise, or what is your favorite exercise that you do with the group?
I wouldn't dare to do any spiritual work with any group, because that's precisely one of the biggest, my advice and my message. Don't try it. Don't do that. Don't do spiritual. I hope that after the lockdown, I can travel to New Zealand, where I would like to be trained with Dale Hunter. I consider that one of the most renowned experts in this type of spiritual dimensions, also because in New Zealand, they give a lot of importance to the Maori people and the Maori values. Mm-hmm. So that's probably where in New Zealand you could definitely try that kind of exercise. But don't try it in countries like Germany or Netherlands or UK or Nordic, especially the Nordics, Anglo-Saxon countries. Maybe you could try it in the southern part of Europe, in more countries where the spiritual dimension could evolve. But
is sitting in a circle already spiritual to some extent?
I would say that the spiritual dimension could be found in the moments where you encounter yourself as a person with another person. That's where the spiritual dimension can come. An exercise I love to do is I take everybody in the room to a line and say, for how many years are you in this company? Or for instance, if it's a community meeting, how many years are you in this profession, right? And people would create a human line with people like 20 years in the profession or 30 years in the company, and just newly arrived folks in the company in the line. I then split the line, and I have the youngest and the oldest to pair, right? Mm-hmm. And then I ask them a really question: share your first day in this company, or share your first day in this profession. And it's amazing, Miriam. It's amazing. People start to hug themselves in the end. And that's a spiritual dimension where I found is that the spirit is in us, human beings.
What's your discovery in this exercise? What did you notice?
I noticed that there's this dimension behind cognition and emotion. There's a dimension that if you find it, that could really make an impact in a group. Right?
Yeah. So you asked them to reflect on the first day at the company. So it's a lot about company culture. You become aware of how much has changed.
They become aware of how much that changed or not. I know what I ask them to share is their experience. What did you experience the first day you arrived to this company?
This doesn't change.
Yeah.
Now I understand. Because somehow I was thinking about how the company changed, how the environment changed, but the experience is so human that it becomes a connector between the oldest in seniority and the youngest.
You got it. And that's where I think we start tapping the spiritual dimension, there's a dimension that unites us above all other idiosyncrasies that we might have developed out of our background, culture, education. And fear of losing your reputation against the other. That's the worst fear you can have, Oh my God, I'm going to lose my reputation as a facilitator if I say this in the podcast with Miriam. Yes. Sorry, folks, I don't care.
Interesting thought. What do you think makes someone lose their reputation as a facilitator?
If you are not willing to take risks and you're not afraid to learn, then you could easily lose your reputation. You can easily lose your reputation. I mean, it's naturally human to error. Just the other day, I was sending. I normally think of not projecting too much of a professional image of yourself. Don't do it, because then you will suffer more, and you suffer more if you fail, right? So create. Start with your customers on a project like in a co-creation. Like I'm now hosting a meeting on the 28th of January. With former ministers of healthcare. And what I did is I sent already the draft of the document to everybody so people can have more ideas. And the draft that actually had a small mistake, had double some, but it's a draft still, So it's not big deal. We are still progressing. And then when I produce the final document, it will be a document produced by everyone participating in the meeting. and it will be pristine with no errors. And that's, I think, the way you build your professional reputation, is not being afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah. But at the same time, also not judging, not putting your own view of the world upon the group and pushing and pulling them.
That's obviously something that we're supposed to be trained not to do, be the facilitators, and never to impose our views in the group.
Yeah. So one thing that you mentioned in our exploration column that I would like to come back to before closing, because time is running. What do you understand by collaboration architecture, and what does it need to foster collaboration?
I'm so glad that you asked me about that, Miriam, because since I was fired from my last job when I was in Utrecht in Holland, I was working in your country, by the way, in the country where you are living right now. And my boss called me, hey, say, Paul, we're going to make a strategic change in the company. Your regions are no longer being necessary, sorry. So I said, what I'm going to do. And I started this series on architecting collaboration, this book series. And I found myself, from my experience also as a former CEO, is that the collaboration architect is the person who hires a facilitator. You know what I mean? That's a different role that I discovered. Hang on a minute, because we are hired by the ones that are already aware of the importance of facilitators. Mm-hmm. So that's the most important characteristic on a collaboration architect. Collaboration architect is like a facilitative leader. He understands that it's important to listen to the different perspectives in the group or in the problem situation in order to be successful. And that a collaboration architect has a clear vision of where he wants to go. And then he will say, I need here a fundamental professional, which is the group facilitation. I call a group facilitation, hey, you need to facilitate this workshop for me. This is the deliverables I want. Collaboration architect can actually discuss a little bit of the process with the facilitator. You can say, okay, but are you sure about this? And then give ideas. And if the facilitator is a really professional, he would listen to the collaboration architect and fine-tune the process according to his customer desires. And then he delivers the session. And it's like a building block for the building, that we are constructing as a collaboration architect.
Exactly, because the real collaboration, and with real, I mean the collaboration that actually counts, is whatever happens after the workshop, right? So after the facilitator left, then these groups, these individuals, they need to collaborate. So what does it take to keep the momentum or to keep collaboration growing after the session?
It's a good leader, a good collaboration architect, because if you're hired as a facilitator without this overall purpose for what is your intervention, then it's probably pointless. What you're going to do is more like a team building exercise. And I understand that for many colleagues that are also IF members, they make a living by producing what I call team building workshops. And this is very important. Also, the team building is a necessary first step before the groups then start work together in a different way, right?
Yeah. What makes collaboration stick?
Well, it's the fact that you have a foundation on a number of values that we also share as facilitators, the participative values. So if you actually believe that the best decision is the decision that is taken with the person involved to implement it. Yeah. If you have this in-depth belief in the values of facilitation, then I think collaboration will stick.
So even for then participants, that they self-facilitate basically the collaboration after the workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean by self-facilitation. I think that after a number of workshops where you as a professional facilitator, Miriam, you with your client, you conduct like 5-6 workshops. By the 6th workshop, if it's the same group, I'm sure your participants will start to embody, to absorb the values, the process, and they can become themselves, they can take turns, and that's it. You transfer the process to the group, right?
So basically then the sequence of workshops becomes a form of experiential learning where the group picks up the methods that work because they experience the outcome and the benefits, and then they start doing it themselves.
Absolutely, Miriam. And the most important ingredient is, like, we're talking about the coronavirus, which has a very, very nasty effect on mankind. But that's, I think, there could be a positive effect on the virus effect. If you, in the end of each meeting, in the end of each process, debrief. Yes. That's the most fundamental way of improving your meetings, is debrief. I've set aside sometimes to say, how can this meeting be improved? Yeah. And listen. And then if you do this circle, then you are creating a positive virus effect on better meetings.
Absolutely. Just to raise the awareness that a meeting is also a process that can be improved, and that it's not our destiny to sit in boring meetings.
Absolutely. It's not the destiny to sit in boring meetings. Yeah. Of course, saying that this is not painting like a pink world, as we have this metaphor in Spain of the mundo cor-de-rosa. It's that we have to think about that there are also organizational cultures that are perhaps not the right cultures to do to host a facilitated meeting, right? So that's also another parallel. And some colleagues are so desperate to making money that they would make their business and say, okay, let's do it. And then there's a mistake, because for some kind of organizations, it's not yet the moment to do this kind of participative processes, right? I would say be careful on that.
So how would you, just to close off, one advice, how do you identify these cultures or these organizations where we better stay away from as professional facilitators who have an ambition to change or to impact?
I would trust my instinct, but this is obviously not a good answer for our listeners here. They were probably seeking for, give me a little bit more advice on how. But I mean, there are some things that, if the founder or CEO of the organization is someone that has all the answers, right? Mm-hmm. If the CEO of the organization says, no, we are not going to try this because this was never tried this before. No, forget about that. Propose me something else. Whenever you're dealing with someone that is talking to you about in this way, be very careful. Because you might convince him to pay you the whatever amount you're going to charge for a workshop, but then nothing will happen. Your reputation will be jeopardized. Lots of feelings in the participants will have like this illusion that, finally something's going to happen. But then after the workshop happens, because of the boss has no clear values of participative management, nothing will happen.
Yeah. If we realize from the beginning that there's a yes, but, or no, and that real change is not really wanted. Yeah.
Real change is not really wanted. And also I think that there's also a lot you can do as a consultant. Mm-hmm. Right, or as an executive coach. I mean, that's why even as for every facilitator, I think in the world there are 10 executive coaches. They are a much needed profession. We need to intervene at the CEO level, management level up front, and then obviously when these guys become collaboration architects, mm-hmm. then they'll start to hire facilitators.
Okay, so a collaboration architect is basically the next version of a leader.
Yeah, it's a facilitative leader. It's a leader that embodies the values of facilitation and participation, right? He's a leader that realizes that he cannot do anything alone. You need to have inputs and the commitment, not just the inputs, because it's easy to say, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? I do a survey in my organization. And I know, I know that my organization feels this way. I'm going to take this decision. Yes, but what about the implementation? What about the commitment to that decision from your members?
I love that approach. And it's my dearest desires that leaders become facilitators, and that maybe even in a job description for every leadership role or management role you have, the item needs to be able to facilitate.
Yes, that's and think about having these started at school.
Oh yes.
High school, university.
Learning to facilitate. This would be an entire episode as such.
Exactly. And by the way, maybe this is off the record or not, I'm not sure. I have still in my mind the fact that you want to discuss about the university program.
Yes. How to include facilitation in university.
I have that. I have this in my over the horizon list. So I hope that we can talk later on this year.
Absolutely. And maybe even record another episode on that.
Okay.
And imagine that someone fell asleep after minute 1 of our interview, just woke up and said, what is it about education and facilitation? What was all this episode about? What would you like this person to take away if they don't have time to listen to the hour?
Well, it's the same principle as in the collaboration architecture for companies. It's the same thing as collaboration architecture for educators and universities, and thinking about the education as a collaborative process requires, first of all, that you believe in the values of team teaching. Mm-hmm. Instead of having one teacher per room, have a team, have 2 or 3 teachers in the room. That's, I think, there are challenges in terms of resources and costs covered by that. But there's way of organizing education with the perspective of the collaboration architect, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And if you had to summarize our conversation over the last hour, because we went places, where's the nugget for you? If someone has to remember one thing from our conversation.
That's a good question, but I would say that, well, you got me thinking there. But so many things we discussed here, but perhaps this notion of the crutch for your professional enhancement, for your professional development, think of core competencies in facilitation as crutch, and also find other crutches that you can use in order to become better at what you do. Stay open-minded. Wonderful. That's probably the nugget.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time, for sharing your experience and expertise.
It's a really pleasure, Miriam, and thank you so much for the love and care you put on preparing these podcasts. You're really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.